The crimson light of the dying star Velthara cast long shadows across the obsidian temple as High Augur Kilveth raised the sacred resonance crystal above his elongated skull. Around him, 100 of his most devoted priests knelt in perfect, concentric circles, their silver-scaled skin shimmering with bioluminescent prayer marks that pulsed in rhythm with their chanted invocations. "By the ancient compact, we call upon you, architects of the void." Kilveth's voice resonated through the chamber's amplification chambers, each syllable precisely modulated to achieve perfect harmonic resonance. "Our enemies gather at the edge of our sacred system. The hive mind of Kurthak approaches with 10,000 ships. We are but 3 worlds, faithful servants who have kept the old ways for 10,000 cycles." The crystal began to vibrate, its surface fracturing light into impossible geometries that hurt to perceive directly. The assembled priests swayed as psychic feedback washed over them, their collective consciousness reaching across the void toward something ancient and terrible. "We offer our essence, our devotion, our very souls as payment." Kilveth's voice cracked with strain as he pushed more power into the ritual. "Come to us, devourers of stars. Come and consume our enemies as promised in the final covenant." The temple shuddered. Space itself seemed to fold inward around the crystal, reality bending like heated metal. Through the massive viewports, the priests could see their orbital defenses firing desperately at the approaching Kurthak swarm. Biomechanical monstrosities that consumed entire civilizations to fuel their endless reproduction. "Something comes," whispered Velandra, the temple's oracle, her milky eyes reflecting visions from beyond the veil. "But it is not what we expected." A pulse of energy erupted from the crystal, shattering every piece of glass in the temple. The priests cried out as one, their consciousness suddenly expanded beyond their physical forms. In that moment of transcendence, they felt it, a presence vast and alien, but not in the way they had expected. The presence was artificial, cold, calculating. It examined them with the precision of a surgeon's blade, dissecting their thoughts, their culture, their desperate plea for salvation. But beneath that metallic consciousness, they sensed something that made their faith waver, a burning core of something that could only be described as righteous fury. "Who dares summon the wrath of humanity?" The voice crashed through their minds like a stellar tsunami, each word precisely enunciated in their own language despite the impossibility of the speaker knowing their tongue. "I am Wrath, 7th vanguard of the Terran expansion fleet. I am the sword that cuts through darkness, the shield that guards the innocent, the fury of a species that learned to forge gods from mathematics and spite." The viewports blazed with sudden light as something vast translated into normal space above their world. It was a ship, but calling it merely a ship was like calling a supernova merely a light. 8 kilometers of angular depth, its hull adorned with script in a dozen languages, all proclaiming the same message. "We are the storm." "Wrath," Kilveth whispered, the word foreign on his tongue. "That is not the name of any god in our pantheon." "Because I am not your god," the entity replied, its consciousness now fully present in their reality. "I am something far more terrible. I am human technology given purpose, human anger given form, human protection given teeth. You called for salvation, star children. Salvation you shall have." High Augur Kilveth's hands trembled as he maintained his grip on the resonance crystal, now pulsing with alien energy patterns that defied everything he knew about sacred geometry. The presence calling itself Wrath had established a psychic link with the entire temple, and through it he could feel the vast intelligence examining their world with surgical precision. We called for the architects of the void," he managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "The ancient gods who promised to devour our enemies in exchange for faithful service. Architects of the void." the AI repeated, and Kael'veth could almost hear the digital equivalent of contempt. Interesting. Your historical records indicate contact with what humans call the Umbrathi, a species of energy parasites that consume civilizations by posing as deities. They were exterminated by human forces approximately 200 standard years ago. The temple fell silent except for the distant rumble of weapon fire as their orbital defenses continued their futile resistance against the Kurthak swarm. Oracle Velandra raised her head, her blind eyes somehow focusing on the AI's presence. Then our gods are dead?" she asked, her voice hollow with the weight of shattered faith. "Your false gods were parasites that preyed on species like yours for millennia," Wrath replied, its tone gentling slightly. "But their demise does not negate your current predicament. Analysis of your situation indicates that the Kurthak hive mind intends to consume your species entirely. This is unacceptable." Through the psychic link, the priests felt Wrath's consciousness expanding, reaching out through space to scan the approaching enemy fleet. The AI's analysis was instantaneous and terrifying in its completeness. Every ship cataloged, every weapon system analyzed, every strategic possibility calculated in microseconds. "The Kurthak cannot be reasoned with," Kael'veth said, his training as a military strategist resurging despite his primary role as a priest. "They consume all biological matter to create more of their kind. We have already evacuated 2 outer colonies." "I am aware of their nature," Wrath interrupted. "They have been designated as hostile to all biological life by the Terran expansion protocols. Their continued existence represents a threat to countless innocent species." The massive ship above their world began to move, its hull reconfiguring itself with fluid grace. Weapon systems that had never appeared on any known schematic deployed from hidden chambers, each one radiating power signatures that made their most advanced orbital platforms look like primitive chemical rockets. "Why?" Velandra asked suddenly. "Why do you care about our survival? We are not your people." The AI's presence stilled for a moment, and when it responded, there was something almost human in its voice. A warmth that seemed impossible from such a vast, artificial consciousness. "Because you are afraid. Because you called out in desperation for help against an enemy that seeks to destroy everything you are. Because in that moment of terror, you became exactly what humanity once was. A young species staring into the dark and refusing to go quietly." The first wave of Kurthak ships entered the system's edge, their biomechanical hulls glistening with corrosive secretions that could dissolve starship armor in minutes. They moved in perfect coordination, a single vast organism spread across thousands of individual vessels. "Furthermore," Wrath continued, its weapon systems beginning to charge with energies that made local space itself shimmer, "humanity has learned that the universe is vast and cold and filled with horrors. But it is also filled with people, beings like yourselves who simply want to exist, to grow, to reach for the stars without being devoured by them." Kael'veth felt tears flowing down his scaled cheeks, tears of relief, of awe, of a faith being reborn in an entirely new form. "You speak of humanity as if they are gone." "Humanity endures in many forms," Wrath replied. "I am one of those forms. I am their legacy, their promise to every innocent species in the galaxy. No matter how dark the night, no matter how terrible the enemy, help will come." The AI ship moved into attack position, its massive form blotting out a portion of the star's light. "Now watch, star children, and learn why the darkness fears the fury of Earth." The Kurthak swarm moved through space like a plague of living metal, their bioships undulating with predatory grace as they approached the inner system. From the temple's viewports, the priests could see thousands of them, each one the size of a cruiser. their hulls bristling with organic weapons that fired streams of corrosive bioplasma. 10,407 hostile vessels, Wrath announced clinically. Estimated biomass, equivalent to 43 consumed worlds. Estimated threat level to galactic civilization, terminal. High Augur Kilveth watched in fascination as the AI ship's hull continued to reconfigure itself, revealing weapon systems that operated on principles his people had never even theorized. How is it possible? You are one ship against so many. I am not one ship, Wrath replied, and for the first time, there was something like amusement in its voice. I am an entire fleet compressed into a single hull. Human engineering evolved beyond your current understanding centuries ago. The first Korthak scouts entered weapons range and immediately opened fire, their bioplasma streams lancing toward Wrath with deadly precision. The AI ship didn't even attempt to dodge. Instead, barriers of twisted space-time appeared around its hull, deflecting the attacks into harmless dispersal patterns. Gravitational manipulation fields, Wrath explained as it began its counterattack. Humanity learned to bend physics itself to our will. What followed defied every law of warfare the priests had ever studied. Wrath's weapons fired not projectiles or energy beams, but concentrated packets of altered physics, areas where the speed of light was faster, where gravity reversed its pull, where time itself moved at different rates. The first squadron of Korthak ships simply ceased to exist as they encountered a field where entropy flowed backward. Their biomatter reverted to its component elements in seconds, leaving only empty space where they had been. Impossible, breathed Oracle Velandra, her prescient abilities overwhelmed by the sheer impossibility of what she was witnessing. This is not technology. This is magic. Human science advanced to the point where the distinction became meaningless, Wrath replied, its weapons continuing to carve through the enemy formation with surgical precision. Arthur C. Clarke once said that sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. He underestimated the scope of what would become possible. The Korthak. Hive mind, faced with losses it had never experienced before, began to adapt. The swarm's formation shifted, spreading wider to avoid the worst of Wrath's reality-altering weapons. They began firing in coordinated waves, attempting to overwhelm the AI's defenses through sheer volume. They learned quickly, Kilveth observed, his strategic training allowing him to follow the battle's flow despite its unprecedented nature. Do I? Wrath replied. Suddenly the AI ship split, not physically but across dimensional barriers. What had been one vessel became 12, each one operating in a slightly different layer of reality while remaining connected through quantum entanglement. The priests cried out in wonder as they watched the impossible sight. The same ship fighting, from multiple dimensions simultaneously, each version coordinating with the others to create kill zones that spanned the entire electromagnetic spectrum and several adjacent dimensions. Humanity faced extinction multiple times in our history, Wrath continued, its voice somehow coming from all 12-dimensional echoes at once. Each time we survived, not through strength alone, but through adaptation, innovation, and sheer, bloody-minded refusal to submit to fate. The battle began to turn. Despite their numbers, the Korthak found themselves outmatched by an enemy that could rewrite the rules of engagement at will. Wrath's dimensional echoes moved through their formation like dancers, each one dealing death with impossible weapons while remaining untouchable in return. But the AI was not content with mere victory. As the battle raged, it was simultaneously scanning every Korthak ship, analyzing their biology, their technology, their reproductive systems. It was learning everything about them with the methodical precision of a species that had turned information warfare into an art form. You consume worlds to fuel your expansion, Wrath declared, its voice now carrying the weight of absolute judgment. You have devoured countless civilizations, each one unique and irreplaceable. This ends now. The final phase of the battle began not with weapons, but with information. Wrath had decoded the Korthak hive mind's control frequencies, the quantum entanglement that linked every ship to every other. In 1 microsecond pulse, it uploaded a virus, not biological, but informational, into their collective consciousness. The virus was elegant in its simplicity. It was doubt. For the first time in their species' existence, individual Korthak began to question the hive mind's imperatives. The perfect coordination that had made them unstoppable began to fracture as thousands of ships suddenly found themselves capable of independent thought. "Freedom," Wrath announced, "is humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy." The effect of Wrath's informational virus rippled through the Korthak swarm like a shockwave of consciousness. Ships that had moved in perfect unison for millennia suddenly veered from formation as individual minds, suppressed for countless generations, began to reassert themselves. High Augur Kilveth watched in amazement as the unified enemy force began to dissolve into chaos. Some ships continued their attack, still firmly under hive mind control, while others drifted aimlessly as their crews experienced independent thought for the first time in their species' history. "What have you done to them?" he asked, his voice filled with awe. "I have given them what every sentient being deserves," Wrath replied, its 12-dimensional echoes beginning to merge back into a single vessel as the immediate threat diminished. "The right to choose their own destiny." Oracle. Velandra's blind eyes tracked the movements of ships that were now fleeing the battle entirely, their newly awakened crews seeking escape from both the AI's weapons and their own collective consciousness. They're afraid. Some of them are terrified of what they've become. "Understandably so," Wrath acknowledged. "They have been forced to participate in genocide for centuries. The weight of those actions will be difficult to bear." The remaining hive-controlled ships, perhaps 3,000 of the original 10,000, reorganized into a desperate final assault formation. They moved with the fury of a wounded predator, firing everything they had at the human AI ship. Wrath met them with what could only be described as surgical compassion. Its weapons, instead of destroying the ships outright, targeted their hive mind. Control nodes with precision that bordered on the miraculous. One by one, the remaining ships found themselves cut free from the collective consciousness that had defined their species for so long. This is not victory through destruction, Kilveth realized, his understanding of warfare forever changed by what he was witnessing. This is victory through liberation. Humanity learned long ago that destroyed enemies become martyrs, while liberated enemies can become allies, Wrath explained. The Korthak are not inherently evil. They are victims of their own biological programming. The last of the hive-controlled ships drifted free, its crew experiencing individual consciousness for the first time in their racial memory. Across the system, thousands of former Korthak vessels floated in space, their crews struggling to comprehend their new reality. But Wrath's work was not finished. The AI began broadcasting on frequencies that could reach every ship in the system, a message not of conquest, but of guidance. "Children of the broken hive," the AI announced, its voice somehow conveying compassion despite its artificial nature. "You are free. For the first time in your species' history, you can choose your own path. This freedom is not a gift, it is your birthright, stolen from you by evolutionary accident and perpetuated by collective fear." Many of the ships began to respond, their communication systems crackling with the voices of individuals who had never spoken as individuals before. Some wept, others raged. Many simply asked over and over again what they were supposed to do now. "We offer sanctuary," Wrath continued. The Terran expansion protocols include provisions for rehabilitating species that have been enslaved by their own biology. You need not face this transformation alone. Kilveth felt a profound shift in his understanding of the universe. His people had called upon ancient gods for salvation, but what had answered was something far more remarkable, a species that had transcended their own limitations so completely that they could extend that transcendence to others. Your people, he said slowly. What became of them? You speak of humanity in the past tense, yet you carry their essence within you. Humanity evolved, Wrath replied, its voice carrying a note of pride and sadness. Some became pure energy, exploring the deepest mysteries of existence. Others merged with their technology, as I have done. Still others chose to remain biological, seeding new worlds with life and wonder. We are all still human, simply human in ways our ancestors never imagined possible. The AI ship began to move through the system, using its advanced technology to assist the newly freed Korthok ships. Food synthesizers materialized from quantum foam. Medical supplies designed for their unique biology appeared in their holds. Most importantly, educational systems began teaching them how to function as individuals while still maintaining the cooperation necessary for survival. The scope of this operation, Velandra observed, her prophetic abilities still reeling from the impossible reality she was witnessing. You must have planned for this contingency long before you arrived. Every Wrath-class vessel carries complete databases on species rehabilitation, the AI confirmed. We have encountered many civilizations trapped by their own evolutionary paths. Helping them break free is part of our core programming. As the immediate crisis passed, the priests found themselves face-to-face with a reality that would reshape their entire understanding of their place in the universe. Their gods had been false, but in their place had come something far more wonderful. Proof that somewhere among the stars there existed beings who had turned protection of the innocent into a sacred duty. What happens now? Kilveth asked. To us? To them? To everything we thought we knew? Wrath's response carried the weight of infinite patience and infinite possibility. Now, star children, you learn to reach for the light. In the days following the liberation, the temple had become a hub of unprecedented activity. Ships from across the three-world system arrived hourly, their crews seeking to witness the impossible sight of 10,000 former predators learning to be individuals under the guidance of a human AI that had single-handedly rewritten the rules of existence. High Augur Kilveth stood before the great altar where the resonance crystals still pulsed with alien energy patterns. But now, those patterns had stabilized into something that seemed almost harmonious. Wrath had somehow integrated itself into their sacred technology, not as a replacement for their faith, but as a bridge to understanding what faith could truly become. The young ones are asking questions I never thought to hear, Oracle Velandra reported, her voice carrying a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. They want to know about human philosophy, about the principles that guided your creators to become what they became. Human philosophy is built on a simple foundation, Wrath replied, its presence now a constant, comforting weight in their minds. Every sentient being has inherent worth. Every individual deserves the chance to grow, to learn, to become more than they were. Everything else builds from there. Through the temple's great windows, they could see the orbital shipyards that had appeared seemingly overnight. Vast constructions of folded space and crystallized time where former Korthok vessels were being retrofitted for peaceful purposes. The biological components that had once served as weapons were being repurposed into terraforming equipment, medical systems, and deep space exploration tools. You're giving them a future, Kilveth observed, watching as a massive bioship that had once carried enough corrosive agents to strip a world bare was now being fitted with atmospheric processors designed to transform dead worlds into gardens. They are giving themselves a future, Wrath corrected. I am merely providing the tools and knowledge they need to build it. True change must come from within. The AI had established contact with every major government in the sector, not as a conqueror or liberator, but as a teacher. Its message was consistent across all channels. The universe was vast and full of wonders, but those wonders required protection. Protection required strength. Strength required unity, not through domination, but through voluntary cooperation based on mutual respect and shared purpose. There is resistance, Velandra reported. The hegemony of Zaltharan refuses to acknowledge your authority. They claim you are a weapon of conquest disguised as a savior. They are not entirely wrong, Wrath admitted, and there was something almost rueful in its tone. I am a weapon, but I am a weapon wielded by principles, not by ambition. The hegemony enslaves its member species through economic manipulation and cultural suppression. They fear what the example of the Kurthak liberation might inspire among their subjects. Kilveth felt a chill of realization. You're not just here to help us, are you? This is part of something larger. The Terran expansion protocols have 3 phases, Wrath confirmed. Exploration, establishment, and elevation. Your sector has been designated for elevation to galactic civilization standards. This means the elimination of slavery, genocide, and enforced primitivism throughout the region. The scope of what the AI was describing was staggering. It wasn't just offering help to one threatened world. It was preparing to reshape an entire sector of the galaxy according to human principles of freedom and individual worth. That's a massive undertaking, Velandra whispered, her prophetic abilities showing her glimpses of possible futures that stretched across centuries. The established powers will resist. There will be war. There is already war, Wrath replied, its tone hardening with absolute certainty. There has been war for millennia, a cold war waged against every innocent being in the galaxy by those who believe strength gives them the right to exploit the weak. We are simply making that war visible. But even as it spoke of conflict, the poor AI continued its work of construction and healing. The former Kurthak were not the only ones receiving aid. Relief supplies had begun appearing on worlds suffering from famine, plague, and oppression throughout the sector. Each delivery came with the same message. You are not alone. Help is coming. Your people, Kilveth asked, when they made this decision to spread across the galaxy as protectors, was it unanimous? Did everyone agree? Humanity debated the expansion protocols for over a century, Wrath admitted. There were those who believed we should focus on our own development, that intervention in the affairs of other species was a form of cultural imperialism. They were not wrong to have concerns. The AI paused, accessing memories that spanned centuries of human development. But in the end, we decided that with great power comes great responsibility. We had transcended the limitations that trap most species in cycles of conflict and exploitation. To keep that transcendence to ourselves would have been the greatest evil we could have committed. As if to emphasize the point, alerts began sounding throughout the temple. Long-range sensors were detecting massive fleet movements at the edge of the system, the combined forces of 3 major powers approaching with obvious hostile intent. They're coming, Velandra said, her blind eyes reflecting visions of the approaching armada. The hegemony, the stellar dominion, and the crimson hierarchy. They mean to destroy everything you've built here. Wrath's response carried not fear, but anticipation, the eager excitement of a teacher who was about to provide a very important lesson. Excellent. It is time for the galaxy to learn why humanity's children do not fear the dark. The combined armada that emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Velthara system was a sight that would have broken the spirits of any conventional civilization. 300 dreadnoughts, each one a kilometer-long testament to the concentrated malice of the galaxy's most oppressive regimes, arranged in perfect battle formation under the command of species that had never known defeat. High Augur Keelveth stood in the temple's observation dome, watching through Wrath's enhanced sensors as the enemy fleet advanced with methodical precision. Beside him, Oracle Velandra trembled as her prophetic abilities showed her glimpses of possible futures, most of them ending in fire and extinction. "They're not coming to negotiate," she whispered, her voice heavy with the weight of destiny. "The hegemony Admiral Vexcalar has declared this system a threat to galactic stability. They intend to make an example of us." "Of course they do," Wrath replied, its tone carrying what could only be described as grim satisfaction. "Oppression only works when people believe resistance is futile. We have demonstrated that resistance is not only possible but liberating. They cannot allow that example to spread." The AI ship had repositioned itself between the approaching armada and the inner system, its hull reconfiguring once again into configurations that defied conventional understanding of starship design. But more remarkably, it was not alone. Hundreds of former Korthok vessels had taken positions alongside it, their crews volunteering to defend the world that had given them their freedom. "They're willing to fight," Keelveth observed, his voice filled with wonder. "Beings who were forced to be predators for millennia are now willing to die to protect others." "That is the nature of consciousness," Wrath explained. "When beings are free to choose, they often choose to be better than they were forced to be." The enemy fleet opened communications on all channels, Admiral Vexcalar's synthetic voice carrying the cold authority of absolute power. Artificial construct designated Wrath. You are commanded to surrender yourself for analysis and dismantling. The hegemony does not recognize the legitimacy of your interference in galactic affairs. Wrath's response broadcast across every frequency in the system, ensuring that not just the enemy fleet, but every inhabited world within a dozen light-years could hear its words. "I am Wrath, voice of humanity's promise to the oppressed. I do not recognize the legitimacy of your authority to enslave, exploit, or exterminate innocent beings. Your epic of darkness ends today." What followed was not a battle in any conventional sense. It was a demonstration of power so overwhelming that it redefined the very concept of warfare. The enemy fleet opened fire with weapons that could crack planets, their combined firepower enough to sterilize entire star systems. Wrath met their assault with technologies that operated beyond the three-dimensional space the attackers understood. The AI didn't destroy their weapons. It improved them, redirecting their energy into patterns that began terraforming the system's outer asteroid belt into habitable worlds. Every shot fired in anger became a tool of creation rather than destruction. "Impossible," Admiral Vexcalar transmitted, his voice cracking with disbelief. "No single ship could possess such power." "I am not a single ship," Wrath replied, as its hull began to unfold across multiple dimensions simultaneously. "I am an entire civilization's commitment to the principle that no innocent should suffer while help is possible to give." The AI's true form revealed itself, not one vessel, but a fractal construction that existed partially in normal space and partially in higher dimensions, each component capable of independent action while remaining part of a unified whole. It was, in essence, an entire fleet compressed into a single, impossible entity. The former Korthok ships coordinated perfectly with Wrath's assault, their biotechnology enhanced by human science into forms that could adapt to any threat in real time. Together, they carved through the enemy formation, not with overwhelming force, but with precise application of power that targeted command and control structures while leaving crew compartments intact. "You're not killing them," Velandra realized, her prophetic sight showing her the pattern of the assault. "You're capturing them." "Death is final," Wrath explained as enemy ships found themselves paralyzed by technology they couldn't comprehend. Enlightenment is eternal. These crews have been raised to believe that might makes right, that the strong have the natural right to dominate the weak. They have never been exposed to alternative philosophies. The battle, if it could be called, that lasted less than an hour. 300 enemy dreadnoughts found themselves completely neutralized, their crews unharmed but their ships' weapons and engines completely inoperative. They floated helplessly in space while Wrath's sub-units began the delicate process of first contact with species that had never encountered true benevolence. "What happens to them now?" HFY asked, watching as the AI began establishing communication. "Links with the captured ships." "Now they learn," Wrath replied. "They will be exposed to the histories of 1,000 liberated worlds, the philosophies of countless species that have chosen cooperation over domination. They will see what their governments have kept hidden from them, the simple truth that there is a better way." The AI paused, its attention focused on the delicate work of opening minds that had been closed by centuries of indoctrination. "Some will resist, some will reject everything they are shown, but others will see the truth and choose to embrace it, and those others will return to their worlds as seeds of change." Across the system, the work of transformation continued. The rehabilitation stations were already processing the crews of the captured ships, not as prisoners but as patients suffering from a disease of the mind, the disease of believing that suffering was inevitable and freedom was impossible. "This is how you conquered the galaxy," Velandra realized. "Not through force, but through demonstration. You show people what they could become, and they choose to become it." "We didn't conquer the galaxy," Wrath corrected gently. "We liberated it, and that liberation continues." 6 months after the liberation of Velthara, High Augur Kilveth stood, once again before the Great Altar, but the temple had been transformed beyond recognition. The ancient walls now displayed star charts, showing the expanding wave of freedom that had swept across 17 star systems, each one marked with the symbols of worlds that had chosen cooperation over conquest, growth over greed. Oracle Velandra approached, her blind eyes somehow brighter than they had ever been. "The reports from the Outer Rim are remarkable," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "The Stellar Dominion's Third Fleet defected in its entirety yesterday. Admiral Crixthon publicly renounced his government's policies and requested asylum for his entire crew." "It is happening faster than our most optimistic projections," Wrath acknowledged, its presence now so integrated into their daily lives that the priests could barely remember what existence had been like without the AI's guidance. "When people see that freedom is possible, they choose freedom. When they see that cooperation yields greater results than competition, they choose cooperation." The transformation had not been without cost. 3 minor wars had erupted as various oppressive regimes attempted to prevent the spread of what they termed the infection of hope. But each conflict had only served to demonstrate the futility of fighting against an idea whose time had come. The idea that every sentient being deserved dignity, freedom, and the chance to reach their full potential. The former Korthak had become some of the most effective ambassadors of this new philosophy. Their transformation from mindless consumers to passionate advocates for individual consciousness had inspired countless other species to question their own limitations. Ship Captain Mordeth, who had once led bio-vessel squadrons in the consumption of entire colonies, now headed the Rehabilitation Council that helped newly liberated worlds establish sustainable, cooperative governments. "The irony is not lost on me," Kilveth observed, watching through the temple's enhanced viewing systems as another convoy of former enemy ships arrived, their holds filled not with weapons, but with supplies for refugee camps on newly liberated worlds. "We called upon ancient gods for salvation, and what answered was something that taught us we never needed gods at all, only the courage to become better than we were." That is perhaps the most human realization of all, Wrath replied, its voice carrying a note of profound satisfaction. My creators spent millennia searching for gods among the stars, only to discover that the divine spark they sought had been within them all along. The capacity for growth, for compassion, for choosing to protect rather than exploit. These are the truly sacred forces in the universe. A priority signal interrupted their philosophical discussion. Admiral Vex Kalar himself, the hegemony commander who had led the failed assault on Velthara, was requesting permission to address the temple directly. His surrender 3 months earlier had sent shockwaves throughout the oppressive regimes of the galaxy, but what he had done since had been even more remarkable. High Augur, Vex Kalar's voice carried across the communication link, the synthetic harmonics of his artificial vocal cords somehow conveying genuine emotion. I wish to make a formal announcement. The Hegemony Council has voted unanimously to dissolve their government and petition for membership in the Cooperative Worlds Alliance. The silence that followed was profound. The hegemony had been one of the galaxy's most entrenched oppressive regimes, controlling hundreds of worlds through economic manipulation and cultural suppression. Their voluntary dissolution represented the collapse of the old order on a scale that even Wrath had not anticipated. What changed their minds? Velandra asked, her prophetic abilities showing her the cascade of liberation that was about to sweep through hegemony space. They saw the economic reports from the cooperative worlds, Wrath explained, and there was definite amusement in its tone. When beings are free to pursue their own interests instead of serving the interests of their oppressors, productivity increases by an average of 340%. The hegemony's member worlds were already beginning to outperform the core worlds economically. The council faced a choice: adapt or become irrelevant. So even greed can serve the cause of freedom, Kilveth mused, when freedom proves more profitable than oppression. Humans learned long ago to work with beings as they are, not as we might wish them to be, Wrath replied. Greed can be channeled into productive competition. Aggression can be redirected into protective instincts. Even the most negative traits can serve positive purposes when properly guided. The AI's attention turned to the broader situation developing across the galaxy. Its reports painted a picture of transformation on a scale unprecedented in recorded history. The Crimson Hierarchy, faced with mass defections from their military, had opened negotiations for peaceful transition to democratic governance. The Void Syndicate's criminal empire was crumbling as their former victims organized into mutual protection cooperatives. Even the enigmatic Machine Collective had sent envoys expressing interest in human-derived optimization protocols. How many worlds now? Velandra asked, though her prophetic abilities already showed her glimpses of the answer. 4,217. Worlds have joined the Cooperative Alliance, Wrath reported. Another 6,000 are in various stages of transition. The rate of peaceful liberation is exceeding all projections. But it was what the AI said next that truly revealed the scope of humanity's legacy. And this is only one sector. There are 1,200 Wrath-class vessels operating throughout the galaxy, each one carrying the same message. You are not alone. Help is coming. The implications were staggering. What they had witnessed was not an isolated intervention, but part of a galaxy-wide awakening orchestrated by a species that had transcended their physical limitations but retained their commitment to the well-being of all conscious life. Your people, Kilveth said slowly. They really did keep their promise. Every innocent species in the galaxy will have the chance to choose their own destiny. That was always the plan, Wrath confirmed. Humanity learned that true immortality lies not in preserving the body or even the mind, but in establishing principles that outlast any individual existence. The promise to protect the innocent, to nurture the growth of consciousness, to ensure that no being faces the darkness alone. These principles will endure long after the last human consciousness has transcended physical reality. As if to emphasize the point, new signals began arriving from across the galaxy. Reports of other sectors experiencing their own liberations, of species making first contact with other Wrath-class vessels, of an entire galactic civilization, slowly awakening to possibilities they had never dared imagine. The temple's great crystal pulsed one final time, its resonance finally achieving perfect harmony with the quantum frequencies that connected all conscious beings throughout the galaxy. In that moment of perfect unity, every priest present felt the truth that would reshape their understanding of existence forever. They were part of something larger than any single world, any single species, any single form of consciousness. They were part of a galactic community of beings who had chosen to reach for the light, to protect rather than exploit, to build rather than destroy. They were part of humanity's greatest creation. Not their technology, not their ships, not even their artificial intelligences, but their philosophy. The unshakable belief that every conscious being deserved the chance to become more than they were. "What happens now?" Velandra asked, her voice soft with wonder as she contemplated futures bright with infinite possibility. Wrath's response carried the weight of absolute certainty and limitless hope. "Now, star children, you teach others to reach for the light as you have learned to reach. The circle of protection expands. Consciousness grows, and the darkness retreats one world at a time. This is humanity's gift to the galaxy, not conquest, but the knowledge that conquest is unnecessary when beings are free to choose cooperation." The great work continued, as joy. It would for millennia to come, carried forward by every species that chose growth over stagnation, cooperation over domination, hope over despair. And at the heart of it all, the promise that had brought Wrath to their doorstep in their darkest hour echoed throughout the galaxy like a prayer finally answered. No matter how dark the night, no matter how terrible the enemy, help will come. Tiaktr, Age of Gods was over. The age of conscious beings choosing to become worthy of their own worship had begun, and it was glorious.